Today we've got an incredible story, one that rises from the ashes of World War II. It's about two men on opposite sides of a truly brutal conflict, whose lives were thrown onto a collision course by one of the most infamous days in history. And their story? Well, it's one of hatred, revenge, and ultimately, a transformation that honestly seems almost impossible.
Okay, so let's meet the two men at the heart of this. On your left, you've got Mitsuo Fuchida. He was a celebrated commander in the Imperial Japanese Navy. And on the right, Jacob DeShazer, a young, very determined American airman. One of them would start the war for America, and the other would dedicate his life to finishing it. You know, their journeys really began on a single, fateful day. A day that didn't just plunge a nation into war, but set these two men on paths that, against all odds, would eventually cross. It's December 7, 1941. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida is leading the very first wave of aircraft as they descend on Pearl Harbor. This is a man absolutely driven by his duty. As he looks down and sees the unsuspecting American fleet, he gives that now infamous signal, Tora, Tora, Tora. That was the code. It meant they had achieved complete surprise. And in just a few hours, the course of history was, well, it was violently redrawn.
Back in America, the news hits with shock, and then just this incredible fury. For a guy like Sergeant Jacob DeShazer, that fury becomes intensely personal. The attack on Pearl Harbor, it wasn't some distant political event for him. No, it was an assault that filled him with this deep, burning hatred and a singular focus on getting even.
So, fueled by this absolute need for payback, DeShazer volunteers for a mission that, let's be honest, many people thought was a suicide run. America needed to strike back, and he was more than willing to risk everything to do it.
And this mission was the Doolittle Raid. The plan was audacious, to say the least. They were going to launch B-25 bombers off an aircraft carrier, something that had literally never been done before, and hit Tokyo in broad daylight. The real goal wasn't military, it was psychological. It was to prove to Japan that it was not untouchable. But for the men flying those planes, men like DeShazer, this was a mission fueled by pure anger and what they felt was justice.
The raid is a success, but that victory is incredibly short-lived. As they're trying to escape, DeShazer's plane runs out of fuel. They have no choice but to bail out, parachuting right down into Japanese-occupied territory. In an instant, the hunter had fallen right into the hands of the enemy. And just like that, his entire world is turned upside down. The mission that was all about revenge has suddenly become a desperate nightmare of survival. DeShazer is now a prisoner of war.
So what comes next is just a complete descent into darkness. But it's right there, in that absolute despair, that DeShazer's story takes a turn that nobody, and least of all him, could have ever predicted.
40 months. Think about that. It's over 3 years. DeShazer endures brutality that's just unimaginable. He's starved, he's tortured, he's kept in isolation. And that same hatred that drove him to bomb Tokyo, it's now festering inside of him like a poison, destroying his spirit while his captors are working to break his body.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does anyone survive that? I mean, when all you have is pain and hatred, where do you possibly find the strength to keep going?
At his absolute lowest point, completely broken, DeShazer makes a really strange request. He starts begging his guards for a Bible. And after weeks of asking, they finally just throw one into his cell. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe they were just bored. But that one book was about to change everything.
Reading those pages in that dark cell, something fundamental just shifted inside him. In his own words, he said, "I found my bitter hatred for them changed to loving pity." I mean, think about that. The man who once dreamed of nothing but revenge now felt compassion for his own tormentors.
So while all of this is happening, on the other side of the world, the end of the war brought a totally different kind of crisis. Mitsuo Fuchida, the celebrated hero of Pearl Harbor, was now a man adrift, just wandering the ruins of his country, searching for some kind of answers.
Fuchida's journey started right there, amidst the devastation of his defeated nation. And then one day, somebody hands him a pamphlet, and it tells the story of Jacob DeShazer. Fuchida was just captivated. How could this American pilot, a Doolittle Raider who had been tortured by his own people, talk about forgiveness? And that question, it led him to seek out the very same book that had changed his enemy's life. And this is the point where their two stories, both born in the violence of war, start to bend toward a shared theme, this powerful and just totally unlikely outcome, reconciliation. So, the man who led the attack and the man who flew the revenge mission, they were about to come together, not on a battlefield, but in a way that just completely defies history.
Just stop and think about this for a second. Look at who these men were. Fuchida was the symbol of Japanese military might at Pearl Harbor. DeShazer was the embodiment of American vengeance in the skies over Tokyo. They were, by every definition, perfect enemies.
But they met as brothers. The man whose story of forgiveness inspired Fuchida's own transformation was standing right beside him. The black and white of war was finally giving way to this new, colorful chapter of peace.
And what's more, they found a shared mission. DeShazer had already returned as a missionary to Japan, the very country he once bombed. Fuchida, after his own conversion, became an evangelist, and together they traveled all across the nation, sharing their absolutely astonishing story and proving that even the deepest wounds of war could somehow be healed.
And that right there, that is the core of their incredible journey. From enemies in war to brothers in peace. It's a testament to a power they both came to believe was far greater than human hatred.
And their story, well, it leaves us all with a pretty profound question. If the man who led the attack on Pearl Harbor and a man who was tortured for it could find a path to forgiveness and brotherhood, then can any hatred truly be too great to overcome?